Okay, so last night there was a brand new episode of Agatha All Along, and we are now officially on the Witch's Road. And what's on the Witch's Road but a bunch of escape rooms? That's right. There are trials and tribulations that the witches have to face that will test their craft. That is what we learned from this episode. We also learn a lot more about the backstory of these witches and Mephisto name drop. Could this be the real thing, or are we going to be Ralph Boner'ed? I don't think so. I really do believe that Jack Schaefer has learned from what didn't quite work in WandaVision, which was very little, but there were some things that didn't work. And she knows now that we are going to dig deep into every tiny little detail. So let's dive right into this episode. We start off on the Witch's Road. Naturally, they very soon realize that Mrs. Hart slash Sharon Davis is not actually a witch. And we get some rules like never stray off the path of the witch's road. Not long after that, they see a beach house that appears out of nowhere, does not relate to anything in the witch's road aesthetically. And one of them asks, was that there before? To which Agatha responds with, I think, a line that's very funny, but also very effective, saying, we're going to have to stop asking that while we're on here because things will appear randomly. So when they get to this house, they very much enter a Nancy Meyers movie, included with the amazing kitchen. But a little bit before that, when they're entering the house, on the door there are different faces of the moon, and it says that the face that's on the door is a water face. Later in the episode, we find out that if they hadn't of solved this escape room, this first trial, they would have been drowned essentially. Some of them poisoned, some of them drowned. So this really does give you an insight as to what the repercussions are of failing said task, which I think is a really clever way of putting that out there and just letting you know the stakes right up front, letting the witches know the stakes right up front. So once we get inside the house, our witches get a makeover, and props to the costume, hair, makeup team because they all look phenomenal. As Teen says, straight out of a Second Chance at Life movie, and it all works for them. Catherine Hahn, amazing nails acting, her hair is amazing. All of the outfits, Joe Locke, oh my gosh, so adorable. Particularly, I agree with Ali on that I miss the eyeliner, but I love the hair. So his character makes quite the impression with his new makeover, as do all of them. But that's just the beginning for this episode. So once we get there, we find out that this trial is really for our potions witch, played by Sashir Samada. She is really has to test her knowledge of potions. And while this is definitely her trial, we do learn a lot about the other witches. So, right up the front, they have to all drink wine. That is part of it. And we later find out that that wine is poison. But it does have some really cool, little effects aside from the dying part. Their faces get all swollen and they turn into like the Real Housewives of the Witches Road type vibe, which is really funny. All of them play it perfectly. Mrs. Hart is the canary in the coal mine. She's the first one to chug that wine. And I love that in every single universe, Deborah Jo plays a character who's obsessed with drinking wine. This was very much Kitty Foreman coded, which I loved. And it really helped her, ease into this adventure that she was not expecting. But getting back to the wine, another side effect of this wine that they drink is hallucinations. They all have visions of their past, of a lot of trauma, and we get some backstory to their characters. The one that we learn least about is Patty LaPone's character. We see some sort of Spanish Inquisition type princessy person appear to her in a vision. She follows her, and it leads her to this really dark um, imagery. There is, someone that looks kind of like death a little bit. So very mysterious, very creepy, but not quite sure the context of it. However, earlier in the episode, we've seen this throughout the couple episodes where like something takes over her body and she can't control. She just says random things. And in this episode, one of the random things that she says is "Save Agatha if you can." Um, which Agatha responds to, yeah, I love that plan. But let's get all of these ingredients first because we're collecting ingredients to make a potion that will cure them from this poison they ingested earlier in the wine. Um, but I really want to know what that's all about. But this episode moves so fast that we don't really have too much time to stay on that one link because there's so many other little Easter eggs and things that are dropped. Uh, Other visions that people have, Ali On's character has a vision of her mother, and her mother's clearly in panic. She felt her mother had died, and she knew that she was next because she is convinced that there is a curse on their family, something we learned from Alion in a conversation with Teen's character, um, saying that she got a sort of protection tattoo because her mother was convinced that there was something after their family. Will we find out what that thing is? More than likely, but it is her character. I think there's the most intrigue behind it. I think the mystery that they're laying is so um, human with it. Her wanting to find answers about her own family. And she's just very compelling in a very quiet role compared to like the big showy roles that are in this show. So I think she's doing a really good job keeping us suspicious. Then Sashir Samada, the witch who we are testing in this episode, she has a couple of nice little moments in this episode. Aside from her testing her knowledge of witchcraft, emphasis on the craft, you really do get a little insight into her backstory when she hallucinates a doctor who looks like something straight out of the Nick. So I'm assuming early 1900s. Um, Try to drown her in that amazing sink in that kitchen. But yeah, don't really know much about aside from that. But another thing that she does reveal in the episode is that there's rumors, which we kind of have already known, that Agatha gave up her son for the Darkhold. We don't know what happened to her sons. She has a couple of hypotheses. Some saying he might be a demon, he might be, an agent of Mephisto. That's right, we finally get a Mephisto name drop. And while all along through WandaVision, we were wondering when Mephisto was going to show up, he inevitably didn't. Now we are getting name drops, and so this has to mean something, and I'm sure it will. But she tells all this to Teen in a moment where they're together. And Teen is, before this, idolizing Agatha. But this really does kind of introduce a theme of don't meet your heroes because he's getting a real sense that she is not who he had originally imagined. There's something darker about her, and their relationship starts to shift just a tiny little bit, which is very interesting because Agatha and Teen's relationship is such a center point of this series so far. Now, while I still believe that Teen is Wiccan, I feel like that's inevitably who he's going to end up being. The show wants us to believe that there is a deeper connection between him and Agatha. We get that scene where Agatha doesn't want to drink the poison wine. And Teen says that if she won't, he will. And she instinctively just reaches for the wine and starts chugging it. So that protective feeling has to mean something, that instinctual protectiveness. What that means, that's the part that I don't know. There are a couple of things that I picked up on this episode was when Teen and Alion's character were talking on the couch. He mentioned that his life changed at 13, which was 3 years before this show started, which is right around the time that the events of WandaVision were happening. So makes you wonder, did something that happened with Wanda make his life change? In the comic books, Billy Maximoff kind of is reincarnated into Billy Kaplan's body when he was born. And so with the accident that was mentioned in the first episode that happened in Eastview where Tina's from, makes you wonder if his soul was replaced by Wanda's son. I do think that they're going to try to do some sort of potentially a mix of Nicholas Scratch and Billy Maximoff, maybe make them into one character. And I think that would add some complexity, especially to the relationship between Wanda, the Scarlet Witch, and Agatha. what if they now have to share a son? I think that would be really an interesting development. Or just what if their sons are at odds with each other and now you have mamas, trying to defend them? I think that would also be very interesting. So I don't know quite what's going to happen with that, but I can assume we're going to get Wiccan pretty soon. So yeah, that was like one of the biggest developments from this episode. And on a sadder note, the episode does end with its first major death, and that is of Sharon Davis, aka Mrs. Hart. Mrs. Hart, she had a good run. She came in, was iconic for a couple episodes, went out. I don't know if this is the last we'll see of her. From the get-go, when they were making that potion, I was like, you're forgetting Deborah Joad. She's right there. Get her hair, because they needed her hair to for the antidote, and they didn't do it. So I'm assuming that that's probably why she died, because they forgot about her, which makes me wonder if this will end up biting them in the butt. The fact that they so clearly are very forgetful about things, that are very much in the room, they kind of, lose any sort of peripheral awareness. And so that is something that could be complicated. Also, not that they ever really had a green witch, but each trial is supposed to test each kind of witch. The fact that they still don't have a green witch is very worrisome. Also worrisome because I just want Aubrey Plaza to come back into the mix, because she's really cool, and her relationship with Agatha, I need to know more about it. So yes, that was episode 3 of Agatha All Along in a nutshell. A lot of developments. We learned a lot of tidbits about each witch. I really feel like they are fleshing them out slowly but surely. And I like this concept of each trial being themed to that witch, but also being kind of like an escape room situation, and also adding that genre element that made WandaVision so special without feeling like they're just repeating it. It really does feel like it's important for this story. So I think the theme that I've developed is like women-led projects. So in the first one, we had true crime, which, thanks to Jodie Foster, thanks to Kate Winslet, we've seen a lot of really cool women-led true crime, and now we got the Nancy Meyers treatment. So yeah, that was episode 3 of Agatha All Along. Are you excited? Are you picking up on any of the clues that I didn't? If so, please let me know, because I'm dying to unravel this mystery. I will be back next week. So excited for episode 4. But in the meantime, feel free to like and subscribe, and comment down below any of your Agatha All Along theories.